I feel we should do a decrating experience.
Oh,
so
let's do it.
I think that would be an amazing video. Yes.
So Steve is our lovely host.
Yeah.
Steve
Thank you,
is
Steve.
now going. Yes. So I'm very curious because Steve is going to do something that I would not have done, I guess, or I guess it's that. So and. Yep.
Dang.
Oh wow. Oh, that looks pretty cool.
All right, so that is the Oxide rack as it arrives.
Whoa.
And then you can see that we've got a built-in ramp there.
Oh right, and you can just drag it out.
Oh shit!
yeah,
so
so-
smart.
Yeah, so and this is where you get to like all these little bits that are engineered, right? So like those bolts come undone, that small piece comes out, and then the whole rack rolls out. Side panels are shipped along with it. So
Oh, nice.
these are the side panels here. You've got the front and rear doors. Wow. And this particular, oh God.
Oh wow. That looks heavy. Welcome to the Software Misadventures podcast. We are your hosts, Ronak and Guan. As engineers, we are interested in not just the technologies, but the people and the stories behind them. So on this show, we try to scratch our own itch by sitting down with engineers, founders, and investors to chat about their path, lessons they have learned, and of course, the misadventures along the way. Take it away, Guan.
Yeah, maybe it would be fun to start with the office tour. Sorry, I had my opener prepared, but then it's like, okay, we're doing an office tour. Let's do it.
Context.
Oh, sorry.
We started talking about this right before we hit the record button. Thanks, Guang. And Bryan, we see this amazing background behind you. It seems like a warehouse, but actually it's a very cool office. We got a glimpse of it last time we spoke. We thought it would be really cool for our listeners to also get a glimpse of the office. So if you wouldn't mind, can you just briefly show us what the office looks like and what it is?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we've got, we are here in Emeryville, California, and we've got, this is the Oxide office. Let's see here. So it's, it's funny because we were really born right before the pandemic. So we got this space in late 2019 with the idea that we would be doing, we knew we were going to be a hybrid local remote company, but assumed that a lot of stuff was going to be local. Yeah. And we definitely use the office a bunch, but we use it, as you can kind of see, as a lab more than almost anything else. Very open plan, but then importantly, we've got a lot of hardware. This is our switch. Yeah, exactly, right? This is our switch. This is our manufacturing station. So not something we've really talked about too much, but we actually wrote all of our own manufacturing software at Oxide. Oh, wow. And in addition to everything else, and this is what that manufacturing station looks like at our manufacturer. So
to be clear, that is not where we manufacture.
This is not where we manufacture. I know people think this is like the factory. It's like no, this is not. No, this is not that. This big crate here is an Oxide rack. Inside, there's an Oxide rack. The crate itself has been engineered. So one of the things that was really interesting, I feel we've learned so much in building this company, but one of the things we learned is all of the engineering that goes into shipping things. And it is extremely important that when we ship the Oxide rack, that we are able to ship with all the sleds in the rack. So they are these compute sleds. So here are our compute sleds, kind of down here. Actually, I'll get a better view over here. These compute sleds slide into the rack, and so that's a compute sled there, and it will slide into the rack, which got our Oxide rack over here.
Nice.
it is very important to us that we are able, and here's our rack that's actually, this is what we call the dog food rack. This is actually a running rack that we run all of our own software on. And it was very important to us that we were able to ship the sleds in the rack, because one of the things that we're really optimizing is the time from when that crate arrives and the rack is not just powered on, but you've got developers provisioning VMs. And in order to optimize that time, it's really important that you don't have to debox a bunch of compute sleds. This thing ships with 32 compute sleds, and 32 boxes of computers. It's a lot of deboxing you need to do. And you're going to spend just a day deboxing and disposing of stuff that can't happen in the DC, that has to happen in another room. And it just adds time. And so one thing that's really important is that we can ship it with the sleds in, we can roll the rack in, plug it in, and go. But in order to do that, you have to engineer your own crate. And Steve, this is the third iteration of the crate. I mean, it took us a while to get this right. Wow. But yeah, this has been a fun space. So we're in Emeryville, California, and when we were looking at various space, it's very hard to find the kind of space that is conducive to making hardware. And a lot of, we're not looking for a space that a law firm would occupy. We're also not necessarily looking for a space that is a true industrial space. You're looking for something that's kind of that hybrid, where it has industrial aspects with respect to power and so on, but is also something where people can reasonably work. I feel we've hit the balance reasonably well. The heat has been an adventure to get this place properly heated.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and it's the Bay Area, so I know we talked a lot about HBO Silicon Valley a lot, and I'm sorry to go back to that well again, but there's so many just like nuances of HBO Silicon Valley that are just absolutely genius. And one of them is there's an episode in which it's cold. Cold, you have to understand, in the Bay Area is like 57 degrees, which for most of the country would be like 57. I mean, 57 degrees is like, okay, it's like maybe got a little chill to it, but like there are plenty of days that I would love for it to be 57 when it's, Steve went to school in Madison, and there are plenty of days in Madison where you're like,
That's shorts and tank top weather.
I live in Toronto, so that is still shorts and tank top weather.
The short tank top weather.
Yeah.
And in the Bay Area, because we're so spoiled stupid, we don't have double paned windows. We don't have any of the things that you would normally need to survive in other climates. So everyone just like freezes their tails off and there's an episode of Silicon Valley where everyone is wearing like parkas inside because blankets. It's so cold. Yeah. Right, exactly. And it's like, actually, that's just not that cold. But so this office is very like on brand for the Bay Area in that like it's. There are days in which we've had employees who have worn winter hats while working here.
If we only knew someone at a heating and air conditioning company,
that's right.
We could try and solve for that.
By the way, thank you for giving us this tour of the office space. I think it's really cool. So I studied electrical engineering, and this really reminds me of a lab, and that is just really exciting. You actually feel like a real engineer, not a fake engineer who just works with a keyboard and a screen. So it's pretty amazing what you've done with this space. And I think the rack part that you mentioned, so pretty much if someone gets this rack, they pretty much need to, unbox the rack, but then plug it in and it's ready to go, more or less.
That's right. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Add power, add networking, and go.
Wow.
Which was the intent, because today it still takes companies on the order of 2-3 months from the time that all the boxes land at the warehouse to being able to get them unboxed. God forbid that you've got the wrong rack rails that shipped, even if you've nailed everything else in terms of getting server assembly, storage assembly, networking assembly. The facilities person that comes in because they can control being able to wire these things up, and then getting all the software licensing taken care of. And you can have been invoiced for something and have an invoice due and still be months away from developers being productive, which is the exact opposite of the public cloud experience, right? Where you swipe a credit card and go. And as Bryan mentioned, even just the crate and what we had to go through to make sure that we had a repeatable process for crating and shipping to make that unboxing and that final assembly, which is, if you want doors on the side and side panels and doors and those sorts of things, all of that shipping with the rack itself. Do we not want to tour the conference room? I mean, this is just delightful.
So exciting.
The one drawback of the space was not a ton of separated off space, but it works well.
I think it will be really good for serendipity. Like people will be going around and just, whiteboarding together. That just sounds fun to me.
Yeah,
And
it's been a good space.
Yeah, it has been a good space. I mean, I think that it's interesting you mentioned the serendipity because you see all of this kind of the return to office mandates, which we all kind of rolled our eyes at because like the reason we need the physical aspect of the office is not for the collaboration. It really is for the physicality of what we're building. And the fact that people are like, you are a hardware company. I mean, we're hardware and software systems company, but you're also like all remote. It's like, well, yes. I mean, yes, there's a lot of lab work that's involved in hardware. There's also most of the work is not. Most of what our EEs do, you are interacting with software. You're interacting with EDA software, simulation software. You're in SolidWorks or you're in Ansys or you're in Altium, or you're collaborating with your peers, and that collaboration for us is all we're doing.
so,
Or you were going to a manufacturing site to do bring up. You are
That's
going
right.
to there's very, very hard to go build a company like this where everyone's in one spot. And let's not forget, I mean, offices are valuable. You've got child avoidance that is paramount.
That is actually critical. Yeah, that's right.
I mentioned last time we're expecting our first baby in 3 weeks. So I'll take that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I keep hearing that from people. You would want to come to the office after that.
You will. Thank God it's Monday for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. And that's your. Well, congratulations.
Our first.
It's exciting, and I think that it will be. Part of what makes parenting interesting is that just when you get really. Like you're just at your wit's end, things change. So just remember that when you're at your wit's end,
Or when you get or when you get comfortable. Just when you get comfortable, you're like,
Also when you get comfortable.
I figured this out. Now we know how to keep him or her asleep.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
Like it changes. Wow.
no,
This is so
there's
exciting.
things.
This is very encouraging. Thank you. I think we can do an entire episode on parenting, which maybe we should at some point. I would love that.
I would say that there is parenting is. I mean, there are other ways to do this, but parenting is extraordinary for your own sense of empathy, and I think it changes like the way you think of other people when you've got because you've got this other person that you are going to love unequivocally despite all of their faults, and it's good. It's good for your empathy. It's good stuff.
For sure. So I want to touch on one. Go ahead.
Go for it.
I was going to talk about the crate. So.
I was gonna say that too. I thought it was such a attention, like a nice example of y'all's like attention to detail. Because that thing is like 9,000 pounds. Y'all said somewhere.
Is the crate? I think. I know the showcase, the rack.
Yeah,
is
the rack's in there.
But I think I can.
Yeah, you should be able to pop it. Actually,
Pop
no,
it.
it's a. I should come out there if you want to pop it.
Sure. Do we want to?
You want to see the inside?
Yeah.
Yeah,
let's do it.
I feel we should do a decrating experience.
Oh,
So
let's
I'll
do
be-
it.
I think that'll be an
all right.
amazing video. Yes, and we can make it.
Yeah,
fun.
this actually. We should. Okay, so Steve is our lovely host.
Yeah.
Steve
Thank you,
is
Steve.
now going. Yes. So I'm very curious because Steve is going to do something that I would not have done, I guess, or I guess it's that.
Are those locks or they're just hinges?
This is the part that you made.
So and yep.
Dang.
Oh wow. Oh, that looks pretty cool.
All right, so that is the Oxide rack as it arrives. and then you can see that we've got a built-in ramp there.
Oh, right. And you can just drag it out.
Oh shit,
Yeah,
so
so
smart.
Yeah, so and this is where you get to like all these little bits that are engineered, right? So like those bolts come undone, that small piece comes out, and then the whole rack rolls out. Side panels are shipped along with it. So
nice.
These are the side panels here. You've got the front and rear doors. Wow. And this particular, oh God.
Oh, wow. That looks heavy.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see.
Yeah, so
Basically,
Yeah.
wheel it out.
so that gets wheeled out, and then so that's it's on wheels, and then once you actually get it in its destination, then you will these will actually screw down.
Oh, so you can stop
and
it,
it will
yeah.
come. Yes, you can actually. Yeah.
Sorry, terrible analogy
yeah.
probably. But looking at this, it reminds me of that using an Oxide server rack is probably easier than assembling IKEA furniture. It's just, I don't know.
Yes, it is. So no, it is definitely it is easier than assembling IKEA furniture in that it actually is. It's kind of funny to think of it that way, but in part because it all comes pre-assembled, right?
Yeah.
So it was very important that we were able to ship this thing completely intact to optimize for that time. And
Yeah.
so yeah, the idea here is, of course, that that rack gets wheeled into your data center. You plug in those power whips and configure networking, which shouldn't be trivialized. I mean, there's a lot to actually, and the whips too, right?
Thanks,
The power is not is not trivial.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Thank you for showing us what was inside of the crate. So we're going to touch on crate a little bit. And so last time we talked, you mentioned that you wrote your own network switch. This time you mentioned that you wrote your own manufacturing software. You're also designing the crate. In building the server rack, you're also designing not just parts of the rack, but everything around it too. And I was curious to know if there is one goal that you're optimizing for. Like all of this is an optimization of something. If I think of social media companies, they're optimizing for the amount of time you spend on the screen. Search, not necessarily any particular engine, but any search engine's goal is to take you off of that page as soon as possible. So in this specific case, what is that one goal that all of this is an optimization for?
Well, I think I'll give my answer. And I think when we talk about this end-to-end process of doing our own manufacturing software, which by the way requires having the right partner in manufacturing that is open and willing to you doing your own manufacturing software. You don't just have like the agency and the ability to go kind of control the entire end-to-end process if you don't have the right partners. And I think we talked a little bit about the Sanyo Danke partnership last time we met and how important that was for us to be able to customize and just the fan speed as an example. But I mean, at the end of the day, what we're striving for is delivering the benefits of cloud computing on premises. And so what does that mean? Well, a lot of what we just spoke about is time to value. One of the paramount things of public cloud computing is that 16 digits to freedom. It's like I swipe a credit card, I have access to this elastic infrastructure that allows me to go start deploying software that is this idea I have or this job I have to go complete, and I don't have to think about any of the rest, and it's fast. That is the exact opposite of that on-premises experience. So one of the paramount goals is to collapse that time to start from 100 days to, seconds once this is installed, but that installation process to go from months down to hours. And to do that, why do things take longer? Well, obviously we talked about the assembly, all the integration and the assembly and the checking and the testing that one has to do before they can turn this over to development teams. And then another is quality. How do you get to known good quality of the complete system before it's being installed? Because the worst place to find out that something is wrong is at the customer site. just generally. And so back to like kind of the manufacturing software, being able to integrate that into our end-to-end process just gives us better visibility and confidence about the quality of system that is going to get plugged in, and be able to test the end-to-end system, not test individual components, the server separate from the switch, separate from the control plane, but being able to kind of do that end-to-end test. Two of the very important kind of higher level goals are delivering that efficient experience to customers, and then delivering that kind of high level of quality of product. Certainly for things like the Crate manufacturing software, when we talk about kind of some of the things we took on ourselves.
And that's exactly it, right? And so that's our lens is, because we're not seeking to actually do everything on our own. And we would be, we want to take off-the-shelf solutions where we can. But there are a couple of these points that are they're actually, the off-the-shelf solutions are either poor, or they're expensive, or they're so proprietary we can't meaningfully integrate with them. I mean, so manufacturing software is a good example, where the manufacturing software is, it's kind of ridiculous that anyone would buy off-the-shelf manufacturing software, because your manufacturing process is so, it is at some level idiosyncratic to what, it's unique to what you're building, and you want to be able to control all the aspects of that. And, I think that our contract manufacturer definitely thought it's like, okay, you guys are you really do need to do everything on your own. But when we, talk about something that we've got absolutely no regrets over, that was emphatically the right decision, that's enabled us to control every step of the process. And the thing that we're always praised for, it hasn't happened to date, but the thing that you want to get ahead of is that you do have a manufacturing quality issue that, God forbid, does show up in the customer base. It's really important that you were able to get on that very, very quickly. And you want to be able to, from that first failure, be able to realize, oh, we've got a bad lot, and and now work with our partners to figure out how did we get here, and then improve the process such that it doesn't happen again. And that comes from us controlling the whole thing, soup to nuts. That also, by the way, allows us to because we don't have 18 different vendors in here slicing away at our margin, it allows us to deliver a product that is way more cost effective for our users. So, economically, it's very important that this has to deliver terrific value to our customers, and it needs to do that, in a way that we can take responsibility for any problem that rack actually has. And that's the lens by which we make all these different decisions. And honestly, like a bunch of these decisions, we didn't make them, we came to it reluctantly. Things like manufacturing software, or like doing the switch even. We did not, when we first set out, we were not going to, doing our own switch is really complicated, but we also came to the conclusion that it was absolutely necessary, and in hindsight is essential. It's not something we could have partnered for.
You hit on a super important one, which is being able to take ownership of that entire customer experience. And that, I think we talked about this last time, but when you think about doing all the hardware and software together in product form, one of the biggest driving forces there was to make sure that if customers have an issue, we can take complete ownership of it, whether it's part of our product or not. And to do that, you need to have, be thoughtful about how you get telemetry throughout the system, and also that you don't have parts of the product that are dependent upon third parties where you don't need to, so that when there's that issue, you avoid the classic kind of gaslighting of like, I don't know. What X are you running on this, or what are you individual customer doing that is creating an issue that we don't want to take responsibility for? It's quite the opposite. And being able to say, to Brian's point, if it's a manufacturing issue, if it is kind of anywhere in that end-to-end system, ensuring we can take ownership of that and correct that issue for the customers is maybe the biggest driving factor to areas where we hit that fork in the road of like build versus buy.
Yeah.
And we definitely look back with no regrets on the things that we have taken control of in that process.
I think the aspect that you mentioned that you have reluctantly come to that conclusion, I think that word reluctantly is very important. Because it's very easy to get distracted by many of these things. Because from an engineering standpoint, it's like, oh, it'll be fun to solve this problem, and sure, we can do it better. But then if it's not in the service of your overall goal, it can end up distracting people a lot, which, I mean, all of us have seen happening enough, whether the team is big or small, whether it's a company young or big. And I think it comes down to having that balance in terms of where you are intentionally making that trade-off to say, we'll spend more time here, but it's going to be worth it. But I'm glad to hear that these decisions have worked out so well for you.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I think it is, because it's overly reductive to say, like, oh, well, of course the engineers want to build their own crate. Like, every engineer fantasizes about building their own crate. And it's like so you can't assume that when you got a group of engineers saying, I think we actually need to write this ourselves, I think it's a mistake to assume that, like, well, of course they're saying that. Because oftentimes engineers are coming to that out of the, like, we are trying to use this other thing, and that's part of the reason why it's actually helpful to have a disposition of, like, all right, we are going to try to use this other thing, but we're going to keep an open mind. And if we begin to hit friction here, like, we want to, like, go reevaluate that determination a little bit. And, you know, a lot of the things that we have gone our own way on are because we tried to not go our own way and came to we got lucky enough to come to an early enough conclusion that, like, no, actually we can't. And then we are willing to take on this stuff ourselves, and we are willing to be like, yes, we'll do our own switch, we'll do our own network operating system, we'll do our own embedded operating system. Like, we've got the boldness to do that where it makes sense. We're not foolhardy.
Nice. So speaking of the server rack, so back in June of last year, so this was like 4 years after founding Oxide, you guys shipped the very first server rack. This was a huge moment, and I think someone on Reddit was forced to eat their shoes. Just kidding, but not really. So then I was listening to a Ox and Friends episode that you guys recorded like right after, and Bryan, so I loved how you described the moment of like you finally shipping being a bit like surprising. So I'm paraphrasing here, but you said it's like climbing a mountain and there's so many false summits, and you get to a point where you're just grinding, and all of a sudden you're at the actual summit and you're like, oh wow, like we're actually here. Like, were there any what were the sort of the memorable like false summits for you guys?
Part of oh god, well, because I think and when you are on a peak with many false summits, at some point, like, you just break along the way, and you're just like, okay, they're all false summits at this point. Like, I mean that's a kind of an important mental breaking to go to, because you really just need to be focused on I've got to go take the next step. But no, there were so many times when it wasn't so much that, like, we thought this was the end, and it wasn't. So it's not, this is where the false summit metaphor breaks down a little bit. But you have so many experiences along the way that when you're building an artifact like this, nobody wants a machine that doesn't boot. It's not like oh, that product is like less desirable. It's like that product is zero desirability. Nobody wants that. And there are so many things along the way that, like, if we don't resolve this problem, it's not like we've got a product that's not quite as good. It's like we don't have a company. Like, we are actually dead if we don't resolve this problem. And, you know, in those moments, you always need, like, you need some number of folks, obviously, that are heads down engaged on the problem. Then it's also helpful to have some folks that are just missing just enough context that they can remain totally optimistic. Of like, oh, like, we'll nail this. And it's like, okay, glad you're optimistic. Like, I've got, and this is true not just on the engineering side, but certainly on the go-to-market side too. That, you know, like, we've got we've got that customer that was really excited that has now gone totally silent and has not replied to the last 3 emails, and this is where I'll be with the Steve. I'm like, oh, no, like they've said like they're really interested and they've got a project. And Steve's like, oh, look, I'm glad you're so optimistic. Like, do you want me to explain to you? Like, do you want me to talk you out of your optimism? And I think that you need both, right? You got to be, you need to have that kind of paranoia and know all of the ways that because you got to take it seriously, right? And like you need to. Though, this is an existential threat that we actually can't get this NIC to come out of reset, or can't, and that's kind of an obvious existential threat. But it's also as much of an existential threat of I know we were this customer was this prospect was very excited, but has now gone silent, and it's actually there are lots of reasons to be paranoid about what's going on, and we need to make sure that we're on that. When you've got a customer that's deployed, you can't take that for granted. At every stage, and if you've got something that is like a wisp of smoke on a production deployment, you need to be jumping all over that and then you kind of need that balance because it's very easy in any of those moments to be like, we're done. It's it's over. Everybody go home. This is God, what the hell were we thinking that we could pull this off? No, it's fold up the tent. And there's a part of your inner voice that's doing that. And I think that for across the company, I think we are all, domain experts and veterans. So we all have our own inner voice in our own domain. But we can also be optimistic. We'll get through this. And I think as a company, we've knocked so many of those down now that I've got a much more, I would say, robust sense of optimism. And I'm less plagued by the idea that we'll never pull this off, because we've now overcome so much that we can actually go, we can do this stuff. And we want to not be, you can kind of become foolhardy in those moments too, where you get, overly bold. So you have to retain that fundamental humility. But fortunately, reality has a way of continuing to dish that out to us. So,
starting with a little bit of delusion and then working towards optimism.
100%. And this is whenever you're doing something new, you've got to balance the world as you're seeing it, the world as it could be, with the world as it is actually. We're no, but actually we don't boot right now. I know, I see a great vision. Meanwhile, it's actually this customer's gone totally silent on us. Meanwhile, back in reality, so it's you got it and it's at that intersection that you kind of have to constantly live.
So as we think about the entire development process and eventually shipping the product to a customer, now having customers agree that they want to buy something like this and actually pay money for it, not just say, oh yes, I'm interested, you require someone to talk to the customer. So this is where the go-to-market team comes into picture. So we touched on this last time, but we didn't get to talk enough about it. So we wanted to get your take on two aspects here, and you can go in either direction in whichever order you see fit. But the two aspects are, when you're starting to build the company, you haven't necessarily validated the product itself, meaning you don't have a working product yet. So at what point do you start building a go-to-market team? And then when you decide you need to build it, how do you actually go about building it?
Yeah, and I think we touched on it a bit last time, but this is possibly the number one place where companies fail. If you kind of walk backwards from a company that didn't make it, very often, I would say, ascribe, a high percentage of it is from thinking that you're further along than you are and starting to pour a bunch of money into go-to-market. And, I think there's plenty of blame to be left at the feet of VCs in this regard, because where a lot of that emphasis and pressure comes from with a lot of young companies is from the investors that have been, in their minds, patiently waiting for a long time for this thing to be ready, that they poured a bunch of money into and took a bunch of risk in and had to make the case internally into their LPs and everything else. But, there's this anticipation of, okay, it's go time. And, I'm speaking now about many colleagues and many past companies where they have gotten to a point where, yes, they're now shipping a product, but they know that they still need to get kind of affirmation and also just proof points back in terms of what aspects of the product are hitting what pain points in the customer, and then quickly optimizing that product to eventually find patterns and build those patterns out. And everyone kind of lazily collects this into product market fit, but it's a whole, set of stages that incorporate finding repeatability in the sales process, the deployment process, the retention of customer and expansion of customer process. But back to that moment where there's the launch and there's the pomp and circumstance, and the PR firm is out beating the streets, and it's like, let's go, it's time to gas it. And that is where I think a lot of companies, understandably, are feel that they need to kind of live up to what everyone expects of them, and that can be an extraordinarily expensive mistake, because you are just shoveling cash into the furnace with the expectation that you're going to be able to start scaling some of the early signs that you have seen. And now back to Oxide, in our particular case, we had an even earlier stage problem, which is we had a lot of potential customer interest, and we were still years away from having a product we could sell to someone. So in our case, it was, at what point in the development process do you start investing in people that are going to begin developing these customer relationships? And you have to. I mean, you do have to start developing those relationships long before you're selling a product, because in particular with the markets that we're selling to, the kind of the Fortune 1000 space and regulated industries, you don't have the privilege of just showing up and saying, okay, we're ready, write a big check. You have to have really understood how that company operates, and you have to have gone through the fundamentals process of discovery and understanding what are the things that are driving their business, and what are the kind of the highest order strategic imperatives in the company, and then how do those map to the product that you are delivering, and or what sorts of pain points are you solving for. So we did invest in that early, but kind of the approach that we took was trying to find someone who had the versatility to come in and be a pioneer, someone who was sort of unafraid of blazing some tough trailheads, and that was able to be equally comfortable in a conversation where they were kind of the business sales front door for Oxide, but also had the depth and credibility of a technologist. And so we were kind of looking for what some companies will call like a sales engineer, a solutions engineer, but who was interested and experienced in engaging with larger enterprises. But then we had kind of the next part of the equation that we had to figure out, which is like also find someone that was going to be willing to do this work for a year plus without having anything to sell, which is
sounds challenging.
Adds a little bit of complexity to the search, because there are great, and I think this is where, forgive me, I'll get on my sales soapbox, but I think the sales industry generally, it can catch some flack / be like routinely denigrated for some of the bad patterns that exist in sales, and there are plenty of them, and that is very well warranted in many, many, many cases. But there also is, and why it has been so deeply enjoyable to be able to work closely with Bryan over the last 15 plus years, is seeing actually how many surprising patterns there are between sales and engineering. And it is, when done right, sales is a real craft. And it's a craft that is born out of, when done the right way, it starts with deep curiosity about everything around someone, and really deep curiosity about how products work, and how technology works, and then deep curiosity about how this particular company ticks, and wanting to understand what are the different constraints and pressures that are going on in this company, and then in this person's role, and what are the things that you really want to understand if you are going to mutually qualify whether this particular product is a good fit for them, and vice versa. And so it is but at the same time, then you have the other side of sales, which is much more transactional. And what sales done wrong is more predatory, and it unfortunately can also stem out of curiosity, but it's a curiosity around how you can convince someone to do something, which is kind of the perverted, sort of the dark side of where curiosity can go wrong. And there are amazing salespeople that are very good at that. That are very, very good at that, and they are very good for their management team and their investors, and so then you've got everything in the middle, right? Which is, you have good salespeople that are good for certain stages of companies, that are good when there is product market fit, and they're very, very good at scaling an organization, at implementing a system that provides a foundation for being able to bring in more team members and do it in a repeatable manner that allows you to start really building that customer engagement across a much bigger market. But winding it all the way back, we needed this pioneer. We needed this person that was willing to deal with that kind of nuanced period before we had a product in market, and long before we had product market fit. And yet this person was going to be super, super load bearing, because they were collecting all of this important data that was going to inform, kind of, in some cases, decent shifts in kind of how we were getting to finished product, and in other cases, just slight little tweaks on what we were building up and down the stack. And but we needed to make sure that we did not overemphasize that. I mean, we couldn't afford to go invest in 3 or 5 or 10 of these folks until we were getting closer to launch. And I have to say, I think we found a pretty darn good one. We found someone who had really good technical depth and experience in the networking world, had been at Cisco for a number of years, Arista for a number of years, had kind of worked with companies big and small, and it was a hire that we had to get right, and it really helped the engineering team, the product team, kind of shape what we were doing and how we were getting that product to market.
Well, and Travis, who was that?
Yeah, I could even call him by name. Yeah.
Exactly, that's a name. Travis was also, I think, has got exactly the right disposition, which is a tough balance to hit, of like, you need to be optimistic and forward looking, but you can't have happy ears. And happy ears is and there are plenty of because sales folks can be kind of naturally optimistic, and they get this kind of natural enthusiasm that can be infectious when they are actually not reading the customer exactly right, and they think there's an opportunity that's bigger than it actually is, or they think that they have not read, they haven't totally understood what the customer is trying to do completely, and they earnestly, not out of malice, but they just they end up believing that things are further along than they are, and in some cases where they're very charismatic, they can end up closing a sale that makes no sense. And that's like, well, okay, but a sale's a sale. It's like, well, not really. And because if ultimately what you're leaving in your wake is a customer that's dissatisfied or has something that they actually don't need, like that's a problem. That's not a way to actually build a sustainable business. Like, yes, you got a sale, congratulations, you got a quarterly number up there, but you haven't actually because you're not on the right foundation. And as an extreme example of that, at Joyent, we took our software and that we were running our own cloud on, and we sold it to other folks so they could run they could run Elastic infrastructure on their own computers. And we signed a new customer who was very, very excited to be a Joyent customer, and we were very excited. And it's like, okay, we closed the sale, great. And I'm on kind of like the first call to figure out what this actually looks like. And I'm like, okay, so I mean, one thing that's important is like, what are the actual machines that you're running on this? He's like, I don't know, like whatever machines you all ship me. And like the computers that you buy, we make the software, you buy the hardware. And they're like, wait, what? Like, so they literally had been led to believe, and this is one of these things where it's like, I don't think that they'd necessarily been lied to. I think that they had an enormous misunderstanding.
They were not corrected.
They were not corrected. And this is like, this is where it's like, you're in a gray area, right? Where it's like, is it dishonest to sell to someone who has a grievous misunderstanding of the product? It's like, well, dishonest is probably a bit strong, but it's like not prudent to do that. And you're gonna end up, and in this case, you like, the customer's like, well, okay, wait a minute. Then like, I'm paying that amount just for the software? Like, this is like a lot more expensive than I thought it was. Because I mean, you're just like, oh my God. And of course, you're just like, how have you managed to like safely get out of bed in the morning if you've got such, because like the customer's grievous misunderstanding at some level, like this is on them, right? Yeah. But ultimately it was not a sale, and because ultimately it's like that's not what they wanted, and it was a huge waste of time and energy and effort, and it came out of big time happy years.
But it's a byproduct of a bigger problem, though. And the bigger problem was that was one example of what was a rush into go-to-market.
Right.
It was a company that raised a lot of money, and in raising that money were kind of influenced by those investors, some of which had a stake in the Joyent turning from a public cloud computing company to an enterprise software company. That was going to then go kind of quote unquote be the arms dealer to telcos everywhere that wanted to build their own AWSs. And that is an interesting idea, and financially it sounds really good because now you can kind of be selling the picks and the shovels to this growing global world of federated clouds, and yet it had not been tested. So before testing, going and hiring a giant go-to-market sales army and marketing engine, because you can't sell without marketing, and I say that with tongue squarely planted in cheek, and which by the way, like marketing is its whole other topic, which is incredibly important, and when done right is company making, but building a top-down sales organization, the moment that you've got a good idea and you've got a little bit of market kind of like indicators and tailwind and themes, is the kind of classic pattern that ends up not working very often. And you can do any of these to the extreme but I think it is super important and really healthy to rather than that pattern of like, okay, and this is a pattern that we saw a lot over the last 10 years, like two technical co-founders, they look at each other and be like, oh, well, who's going to be the CEO? I don't know. I don't want to talk to people. You talk to me. You be the one to deal with those like investors and all those. Like, I want to go build stuff. And that person's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then start building the engineering team and start building the product and getting some good signal from customers. And then, it's sometimes getting gaslit a little bit, but like getting told that like, hey, you need to bring in that sales leader. Like you got to have the business person needs to be brought in, and that is a point in which I think those founding teams need to think very carefully about who that next hire is, and I will always make the case that next hire should not be the VP of sales. That next hire should be that on-the-ground pioneer who is going to go out and learn as much as possible, learning from the engineering team and the product team, learning from these prospective customers that have come in enthusiastic and are like, oh, we totally need your product. And some of the best selling is digging in and understanding that customer doesn't need your product and getting to a short no instead of a long no. And that's best for both parties. And that you are going to hire a better VP of sales with that next 3 to 6 months of intelligence that you can go gather. And the concern around the opportunity cost of but if we don't do it now, these things take so much time. Even to find a VP of sales, to hire and to onboard, and then for them to build their team, because they don't do they're not in the car, they're not in the meeting. Like for them to build the team that is going to go get then onboarded and warmed up, and we're not going to see real repeatable revenue for 12 months, 18 months if we even get started today. We can't afford to wait. And it's it's actually that is the moment that your company hangs in the balance. And what you need to do is, if you want to think about it this way, one way to convey this to your investors is what I heard at just a couple of months ago with a bunch of folks that are running go-to-market in big, what you would consider kind of like big startups now, and they call it the third VP of sales problem. And the third VP of sales problem is that is not even that there were 3 in this particular company, but in a company, you've got the first VP sales, and they do a bunch of heavy lift, hard work, but guess what? There wasn't repeatability, there weren't real patterns, there weren't real kind of repeatable pain points and customer segments that they could go attack. So they would get onesie, twosie sales all over the place and moving too slow, and they got fired. Next VP of sales gets brought in, and they kind of carry this momentum forward, and they get to a point where they're right on the precipice of success. But again, too slow, they get fired. And that third VP of sales comes in and just crushes. Now, that third VP of sales crushing, the bigger problem that is building is for that next company that hires that person away as their CRO. They found the absolute great white shark. We found our person. And they hire that person based on a pattern of success that they had almost nothing to do with building.
As a concrete example, we were, and I'll anonymize this just enough. We were referred to someone who's this person is extraordinary. They built company X. They were responsible for built company X from nothing, and are responsible for company X's success. I'm they arrived at company X after it was public. I had competed. This is years ago, but I know this company pretty well, and it's so you looked at what they were claiming. It's this company had $100 million worth of revenue when you showed up. And it's you didn't build that $100 million of revenue because you weren't there when that was built. And there's a big difference between having $100 million of revenue and having $10 million of revenue. There's a big difference between having $10 million of revenue and having $1 million of revenue. And but the person that was referring to this was believes in their heart that individual was responsible for the success of that company, even though the company they arrived at had already enjoyed quite a bit of success that they were not responsible for at all. And so this happens a lot, that third VP of sales. And that's the one who doesn't necessarily know that they've kind of Forrest Gumped into this thing. And it's because they also may believe in their heart that they themselves are responsible for it all. And I always the opening of The Simpsons, where they've got Maggie's got the little steering wheel in the car that Marge is driving, and I always think about that little steering wheel so frequently. And what's going on in Maggie's
Yanking the
brain.
car, yeah.
Yeah, Maggie's like, I'm driving, and it's like, oh, no, we've merely provided you the delusion that you're driving. And I feel that so often that third VP of sales, I mean, not to take anything away from them, who and it certainly may have had the prudence to realize that this is a company that was in the right position, but it's like very often it's like there's a bunch that came before you that is responsible for laying the foundation that you are now believing that you've created.
Well, and I mean, and again, then to go back, I think it is not a question of should this early stage technology company hire a VP of sales. It is just making sure that they are thoughtful about the timing and the steps that should, in most cases, this is of course, nothing is uniform for all companies, but it really should make sure to learn as much as they can to hire the right one. It's really, really important to find the characteristics that are going to be the fit for the stage of the company. And so you also don't get a situation where you did hire a good one, but they bounce out in 18 months because you weren't prepared for them. And so, but it's hard. I mean, of course it's hard. You've got all this pressure, companies that have raised money. There are expectations where once the product is done, you've got to go scale. And it is one of the trickier periods in a company's life cycle, because if you get it wrong, it is actually like an 18-month pause on the business. Oh, wow. Because you have to go rip all that up again and then go like rebuild that again when you have the right fit. And but when you have the right fit, it's gold. Because now, to speak to the value of a good sales leader in an organization, you know, these folks have a depth of experience around building the fundamentals for repeatability in the sales process, in customer engagement, building the right culture so that you have a culture that is anchored around like responsibility for a customer and doesn't think about it in a transactional manner where it's like, to Brian's point, like, oh, I hit my quarter, I threw my deals over the fence, now I'm on to like the next ones that I want to go land and hit my number again, that are thinking about how these customer relationships are not measured in 90 days or 180 days, but are measured in like 5 years, 10 years. And when that is the case, when you have a culture where folks are thoughtful about the reputation and relationship, as you can imagine, there's more empathy for the customers. There's more curiosity and discovery and there's more discipline around when having tough conversations where it isn't a good fit for a particular customer and helping them understand that, a prospective customer. And so, there's really important foundation that a good sales leader puts in place for a company. It's just that so often we just see so many examples of companies either rushing in or being rushed in to that, and then being entirely deferential to that all-knowing person, and it takes a very, very long time and a lot of money to realize how costly that was. So I both can tell the cautionary tale, and also I think, again, when done right, it can be a company making hire. It's a very, very important part of the team.
So, as you were describing some of the traits of a good sales leader, or even the first person that you hired to get a lot of that data in the first 6 months, for example, I was just thinking about in my head, for engineers or for companies who only have technical co-founders initially and don't have the salesperson on the team. As you mentioned, CEO, whoever, maybe they flipped a coin and said this person's going to be the CEO. They can also learn from the characteristics you described to play that role for the time being. And a couple things that I gathered from what you said is, one is just curiosity. I think we touched on curiosity as a trait last time too, like just be that curious.
Yes.
It's so imperative.
It is so imperative, and It is. It's kind of. It's hard to overstate how important it is, and I guess I've been frustrated recently. So I think that when you look at a company that has a great technology but is struggling to actually build a business around it, you often have behind that company folks that are actually curious about how it's being used. And so we saw a whole, sorry, this is kind of under my fingernails at the moment, because there was a whole era where you had these open source projects that tried to build companies around those projects.
Yeah.
And the projects themselves were wildly popular, and there were exceptions to this, but if you look, you can go through, there are many of these, there's not just one of these, there are many of these examples where if you talk to the people who were behind the open source project, they weren't that interested in why this thing was popular, how it was being used, or how they would actually, in their mind, like, the project is the product. And the project is like super interesting to folks, that's why people were using it. But the product they actually they wanted something more than that for the product. And again, there've been a bunch of these, and I think that if you are, and people have wondered, it's like, well, okay, so we can't actually ever it's impossible to turn an open source project into a product, and it's like, well, it does require like more work, and it especially requires some real curiosity about like, what does someone want around this? Because often, like, and by the way, like, the things that people want are like, hey, yeah, like, I would love to have like LDAP integration or this AD integration, or it's very important to me that the quality of the support experience is terrific around this. And if you were you're one of these VC-funded open source projects, you're like, oh, like quality of support? Like, really? That's, oh, man. Like AD integration, like, I don't know, that just does not sound, that's not that exciting. It's like, okay, then you should not, just like, don't go into business. Like, that's fine. Just don't do, or find someone who's more interested in, because you've created something that people are using. Get curious about why they're using it and how it is a part of the thing that they're building. Get interested in that, because it is interesting. I think this is, I think that curiosity is something that really binds us as a company. Certainly, like, I mean, like, if you're the kind of person who, like, if you're gonna like nod off at a factory tour, not be interested in, someone taking you, like, I'm gonna take you inside of my business and show you what my business looks like. That should be really interesting to you. And especially if that person's gonna be like, oh, and by the way, here's how I envision your thing might fit into the thing that I'm doing. That should be like lighting you up. And if it doesn't, you should really question whether you should be starting a company around this.
So many engineers who are not necessarily finding a company right now or starting a company right now, but they're working at another company, and in their heads they're like, at some point in the future I definitely want to start one. And I think at that point, for them to be in a position where they can do a little bit of the go-to-market work when they don't have, let's say, the right product yet, or they don't have the salesperson yet, what are some of the things that they can start doing from even now at their current job to just kind of groom this skill a little bit? Because this takes a lot of practice, and I think all engineers would be better off if they were good at talking and at selling, I would say. And selling is a skill that I think everyone should have. But what are some things that engineers can do to get better at this?
Yeah, well, I think the last time Steve suggested taking someone to lunch.
Yes.
And understanding what their pain points are, someone else in the company. I think that remains really good advice. I think the other advice that I would add to that is go take a customer to lunch. Go sit with an actual customer. If you're an established company, great news. That company has product market fit at some level. Like, that's putting, I don't know, maybe you're at one of these like VC fueled disasters that like literally has got no customers, but hopefully not. Hopefully you've actually got customers, and go sit with those customers and understand how they're using your thing and why. And even if that's just confirmatory, even if it's just like, oh, this is why the thing that I'm making is important to to you as an end user of this thing. I just make those connections. And I think in some companies, and I think that these companies do themselves an enormous disservice. I think Google does this infamously, where it's really, really hard for a Google engineer to go understand what a Google user is going through. But it's like, come on, you're at Google, you're smart, go figure it out. Like, go find one. Like, go, like, yes, you're gonna, I get it, that you're gonna need to go, fight through some brush to get there, but go get there. Go to a customer and get curious about how, and I think that's a way that you can start to build that interest, because you're also gonna see, just as Steve said last time, you're gonna see a whole bunch of problems that you yourself may have perspective on.
And I think I was going to give a similar answer on go meet with customers. And when you meet with customers, at minimum, figure out, how they are using your product and why they chose the product in the first place and what they considered in terms of alternatives. What were the alternatives? Why did they not choose the alternatives? And that'll start to elucidate like some of the thought process of what goes on behind the walls when a company is contemplating making a buying decision on anything. And then even better if you can get into understanding what that person's world looks like personally. And not personally, but like personally in that workplace. And what are the things that make them doing their job difficult? That may be specific to that company, but oftentimes these are pretty repeatable patterns where it's like, yeah, well, unfortunately the finance team just doesn't understand the value of what this brings to the business. And it's like, well, how do you articulate that value? Who articulates that value? And they're like, well, that's the problem, is honestly, like, no one can. They're just literally looking at the bottom. Now I'm denigrating finance. There's a lot of finance, incredibly important as well. But then, or you're getting an answer where it's like, oh, well, then this person in the organization is who has to go deliver that message. And that is incredibly important information to be gathering about how these bigger organizations work, and getting into some of the fundamentals about what is the buying process in an organization, and who are champions, who are coaches, who are the decision makers, who are the economic buyers. And when you kind of come back to building a good sales culture in that company that this person has now started, and they're looking at how do we go start to scale this, there are some real frameworks that you want to get in place. So again, you have repeatability but back to that person at the company today, there's so much opportunity to learn from your current customers. And that's where you definitely is the best time spent. For sure. And also just understanding things that have nothing to do with the product. Like, you go read the 10K of that customer and just look at the risks section that get called out in the earnings. And totally. Because again, these are the things that are weighing on the executive team that are getting pushed down in the organization. And sometimes that person that you're having lunch with actually doesn't understand why this person is requiring a certain team to do things a certain way. And there are plenty of cases where there's perverse incentives or perverse punishment that's coming down from pissed off investors or a board or these kinds of things that you can actually kind of glean out of those quarterly earnings reports that is all public information if you're curious.
I tried to do like a version of this, not great, at my first job, and then sort of the pushback, I think, from management was sort of like, yeah, do not put an engineer in front of this was enterprise SaaS. And he said, do not put an engineer in front of the customer, and then, let him go on about, stuff. So that was a bit hard, I think, to just directly trying to, because, these are pharma or kind of I feel like.
Okay, so a suggestion there. If one finds themselves in that same situation, there's an easy answer, which is don't put me in front of a customer. Put me in front of a prospective customer that you think we have 0% chance of closing. Put me in front of someone that you think is a dead lead. I mean, again, there's a certain, if the person's non-responsive, it's kind of hard to, but hey, who is someone we talked to that went with somebody else? And I will tell you, an engineer has a much higher probability of getting a next conversation with that person than anyone in the sales organization. And you're going to be able to, and you've got this credible, like, hey, I'm an engineer, I built the product, reaching out because I'd be so deeply grateful if I could get any feedback about how you think about just the problem space. We know that we're not going to be a fit for you all, like you're not going to be a customer, but man, it would be helpful to understand this. And you may have to reach out to 4 or 5 of these dead prospects to get one to agree to take a meeting. But oh man, you walk back with the information learned in that meeting, and the CEO, like anyone in the organization's like, where is he? We need him in the room right now so we can figure out like what we did wrong in this case. And you're going to get the other side of it. You're going to get why the customer didn't buy. And it may be product related. It may have nothing to do with product. It may be like, honestly, the rep didn't get back to me for 7 days, and by the time they did, I was already, down the path with this other person. And so that's an easy one, because the sales organization thinks that thing is not even a 1% chance, it's a 0% chance. So why not? What's the harm?
Nothing to lose.
I
Nothing
like
to
that.
lose.
So to your point, and then so what I tried to do was then to basically go to the account management side and then make friends with like an account manager and then
Nice.
sort of use that as like a proxy. And that was, yeah, like to your point, like super helpful. I was like, oh, I had no idea like this is how like they use the tool. I was like very clueless. But yeah, like learned a ton from just like having even that perspective as a proxy.
Yeah.
So quick time check. We have about 8 minutes. I had 3 questions written down, but I think we can only do one to wrap up. So I'll list the questions and you get to pick.
Okay.
So one question I had was around transparency in sharing challenges with VCs and team members. So for example, when you're building the product, at times, as you said, the machine isn't booting, so you don't have a product, which means you don't have a company. How transparently do you share that with the team and the VCs as well? Because I've seen 2 versions of this, not necessarily in terms of a startup, but even at big companies. This glass of optimism, which everyone can see through, and is like, that's bullshit. Or the other version is being very transparent and sharing that. Go ahead.
That's a short
So,
one. We can knock that one
that's
out
a-
in like 60 seconds, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got to love the bad news,
Yes.
and you have to, I've got good news and bad news. Everyone should want the bad news first. Like, give me the bad news, and you need to be in an organization which includes like your potential investors and board, where I want the bad news. I want to know the bad news first. And you want to be able to give me enough context so you don't want to just like induce panic in everybody all of the time. But it's important that we have the bad news and that you're able to so you need to be transparent about that.
You got to be transparent, but bring the bad news with one of 2 things. Either a concrete ask of who you're bringing the bad news to, of some action you want them to take, or with having already thought through mitigation options for the bad news. So either come with like, here's the path we're going to be on, you do not need to take action, or I need you to take action and here's the action I need you to take. The worst possible thing you can do is just drop bad news on the table and just say like, I don't know, we got to all figure this out.
I don't know, like you tell me you love bad news, so here's some bad news.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a little more nuanced than that.
Yeah, because
I love that. I love that. Those 2 aspects.
Actionable bad news. I like
Actionable
it.
bad news or
Yeah.
having the mitigation for it. I think that makes perfect sense.
And I think that in terms of like our investors, for example, there's been plenty of times like, look, here's the issue we've got. Here's what we've done to mitigate it. Here's what we're just like, this is purely informational. You don't, and I mean, I think virtually those conversations are always like, okay, thanks for letting me know that this is obviously very high priority. Keep me abreast of any details. And, great, that's what people want.
Good advice. Okay, next 2. Let's see if we can do those 2.
Let's do it. We're knocking them down.
The first was GPUs. So right now, I think the Oxide server rack comes with CPUs only, AMD CPUs, if I remember right.
Yep.
And you see so much investment going on just building out data center capacity with GPUs. Is that a direction that you're planning to pursue with Oxide?
It's definitely interesting. I mean, obviously, and the accelerated compute is extremely important, and there are different ways in which it's important. These training workloads are a little less interesting to us for a bunch of reasons. In part because the real value that we bring at Oxide, holistic approach, ease of management, multi-tenancy, running the stuff on premises, that is a little. These training workloads don't look like that.
Yeah.
Training workloads are kind of these dragsters that you take out with ultra high speed networking, huge amounts of GPUs and data. The GPUs are popping all the time. You've got reliability problems everywhere. They are then doing a bunch of things to kind of compensate for the reliability problems. And then when it's like Bitcoin mining, you're done with it. You can just push this infrastructure into the ocean. I don't care. By the way, I need twice as much money to build the next one. And that is a little less, those workloads are a little less interesting. And also the folks that are really running those workloads aren't Oxide customers anyway. They are their own hyperscalers, right? They're the ones that are actually building their own power plants and so on. That said, I think what's very interesting to us is on the inference side. And I think that something that we're very interested in is the what does it look like when we're doing a lot more inference in a lot more parts of the stack. And that looks like having, I think we're going to see the middle get muddy with respect to CPUs versus GPUs. CPUs adopting instruction set extensions that allow that inference to happen on CPU, and then also going to APUs where we have these, you've got cores on die that are accelerated cores living alongside general purpose cores. Is very interesting to us. So this is the MI300A from AMD is a super interesting part to us. We love Turin is the next generation AMD part that has things like AVX512, which is an instruction set extension, just to kind of put some concrete meat on the bone there. And that's really, I think that if you assume, which I think is reasonable to assume, that the rise of LLMs, generative AI, there's a lot that's real there, right? This is not crypto mining. There's a bunch that's real there. Because it's real, we are in. This is going to be a multi-decade trend. This is not something that is going to evaporate in the next 2 years. So we are much more interested in what does the intersection look like when this is in that kind of mainstream on-prem enterprise, and to us that's got to look less like these kind of ultra specialized workloads, and it needs to look more mainstream with respect to CPUs.
And it needs to look less like repackaging of GPUs in 1U chassis, and has to look more like rack level infrastructure that includes CPU and GPU and the networking substrate and rack level power management and a control plane that goes from workload to all the resources underneath in a high efficiency manner. And the NVIDIA's definitely demonstrated this playbook with the acquisitions that they have made, that they want to own all 5 of those points and be able to deliver a rack level solution around it. And the good news, such as it is that we've been at work for 5 years now on 4 of those 5, a cloud computing control plane, rack level power management and networking management, controlling the network, having the CPU by way of obviously our partnership with AMD. And we just now need to figure out what the right hardware acceleration component is to integrate in to deliver a robust solution that is going to fit, as Bryan mentioned, this more general purpose AI landscape in the next couple of years. So we'll definitely be participants for sure. It's just a question of doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that question was too meaty, so we're now out of time for the third question.
we got another 6 minutes.
We got 6 minutes. Okay. Cool. All right. Good.
The next question kind of ties into this one, which is, I saw this tweet recently where someone mentioned that they see this trend where companies now want to move out of public cloud, where if you look at the last 10 years, everyone wanted to get into public cloud. But I think Basecamp is one of the examples where they started blogging about their, this is how much it costs. We are going to move out and run our own cloud, and it costs so little. So curious to get your perspective. Do you see this trend overall in the customers you're talking to as well?
Yeah, I think the trend that is absolutely the case is that 5 years ago, everyone got to the end of their probably 5-year evaluation of public cloud and said, public cloud computing as a architecture is the future. Like this notion of having programmable API-driven elastic infrastructure resources, I want that. I want that foundation for all of my software deployment and management and operation. And so because of that, I am now going to tell my board, I'm going to tell my investors that we are shutting down 80% of our data centers and we're moving all this to the public cloud. And what's happened over the last 5 years is in various states, these companies have gotten 20% of the way through that project and been like, whoa, wait a minute. Why does this not match the spreadsheet that I presented 3 years ago?
Cost or data transfer is a surprising one to many people.
Yeah, what is this line item? I don't remember seeing this on the proposal. But the economics of renting are difficult for vast, large, persistent workloads over longer periods of time. And that does not take anything away from the value of cloud computing. I think that is not what gets mistaken in this narrative right now of the cloud repatriation of like, oh, we're moving off the public cloud. We don't want the public cloud anymore. Has absolutely nothing to do with the product. And has everything to do with the difficulty trying to push the entirety of one's business into that model, into a rental model, into a model where it runs in 8 regions instead of 80 locations, where a model of not share everything, but a multi-tenant model that regulators are not totally comfortable with yet, or that creates a vector for attack that people are not comfortable with, whether that's reasonable or not. And so I think reasons that include economics, governance, not being able to control and understand what the dollars are being spent on, security, latency, is why these are slowing. I think it's actually a slowing of migration to the public cloud more than it is everyone running for the exits. And people saying, well, wait a minute, I'm sold on the benefits of cloud computing as an architecture, but I can't put as much there as I had hoped. So now what do I do? How do I square this? And then yes, at the same time, you also have a group of kind of a part of the industry that maybe grew up 100% in the public cloud and are looking at the economics or the lack of control over the quality of the product underneath them. The inability when their customers are pissed off because something went bump in the night to tell them like why it did, when it will happen again, what they're doing to mitigate it. Unfortunately, when you are outsourcing all those layers, you're not going to have the best answers to your customers when they're frustrated about something. So maybe it's wanting to take more control over the experience delivered to your customer. Maybe it's because you want to lower latency. Maybe it is economics. There are another group of companies that are saying, hey, being 100% public cloud born is not enough. And all the way to the extreme of like, I'm leaving the public cloud. But I think, 98% of this driving force of on-prem kind of coming back into favor and this conversation happening about, wait a minute, not only is it not dead, it's like this could be one of the biggest growth areas ever in the next 10 years is much more around people trying to answer the question of how do I get the benefits of cloud computing everywhere my business needs to run? Yeah. And how do I, if I'm a cloud SaaS born platform, how do I double the size of my business in the next 10 years? It's going to be tough to do that if my total addressable market is only the data people put into the public cloud. So how do I go extend my platform to reach all the data on the planet? And to do that, you have to have this hybrid model where you're using public cloud, you're using someone else's cloud infrastructure on a rental basis when it economically makes sense. And you're using your own, but the reason we started this company is that you should be able to own the computers that run your cloud for the rest of the use cases where from a perspective of economics or security or latency or other makes the most sense. And when you're doing that, you shouldn't have to have this fractured front end to the system. You should have this same elastic infrastructure resource and API driven kind of primitive that is in both in all sides, rented or owned.
That's very well put. I know we can keep going, but we are at time. Steve and Bryan, thank you for being so gracious with your time. We love our conversations with you, and hopefully, again, we'll chat again in the future at some point. But again, thank you so much for today. And also, thank you for showing us the office space plus the rack. That was super cool.
Okay, we have to end where we started last episode in the meet cute, which began with a person who had reached out to Dell with an inquiry and had submitted a web form to see if they could get someone's attention at Dell because Sun Microsystems was not paying them any attention or sufficient attention. And
Where is this going?
just you wait. What wild coincidence or stroke of fate, while we were recording this, that same person reached out to Oxide. And that person's reach out to Oxide starts with the following. I had met Steve about 20 years ago via a web form. I was hoping to do the same again. We're looking for a VMware replacement, and we're going to be scaling our control plane across more sites. So we are we're again going to be reaching out, and it is a nice closed loop here.
Yes.
On the first, second podcast episode.
Incredible. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I gotta.
You're getting it real time.
I had to get you on a podcast to.
Awesome.
Any other company updates that you want to share with me via a podcast? Is there any other?
Ooh, now that you mention it, look,
That's right. Look,
Bad
yeah,
news?
got some tough news. Yeah, got some tough news.
exactly.
All right, thanks guys. This has been great.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Take care.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the show. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and learn more about us at softwaremisadventures.com. You can also write to us at hello@softwaremisadventures.com. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.